Hello, my Italian food fanatics. Today, as you saw, we are going to make fried asparagus. But this fried asparagus, as you saw me plate it, is unlike anything you've probably tasted. With a little bit of lemon juice, there's some pecorino in there, there's shaved Parmesan, there's Maldon salt, there's lemon zest, and it all works together perfectly. Now, why did I choose to do this with asparagus? Because it's delicious. Now, is asparagus good on the grill? Yes, it is. Is it good in the oven? Yes, it is. Is it good steamed? Yes, it is. Is it good sautéed? Yes, it is. Is it good blanched? Yes, it is. Is it sometimes good just eaten raw? Yes, it is. I've chosen it this way. It's a little bit different. It's a little more decadent, but it's spring, and now is the time for asparagus. So if you got some fresh asparagus, or if you find some on sale and you want to eat it, but you don't want to eat the same asparagus the same way over and over and over again, here is an alternative for you. So please, before we get into the kitchen and I show you how to make this, thumbs up, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell, share with your friends, and leave a comment down below if you're inclined to do so. Thank you very, very much for all of your subscriptions and patronage and your eyeballs and viewing time. I really, really appreciate it. So now, without any further ado, come on, let's get into the kitchen and attack the asparagus. All right, my Italian food fanatics, let's get started. Today we're going to make fried asparagus, and we're going to garnish that with some Parmigiano Reggiano, as well as using some Pecorino Romano within our breadcrumbs. We're going to fry them in canola oil, and we're going to use a 3-step breading procedure that you already know about if you've watched any of my videos. First it goes into flour, then into an egg wash, and then into our breadcrumbs. And we'll make the breadcrumbs first because the beating of the eggs and of course putting flour in a pan is not such a big deal. So we'll come back and I'll show you how we make the breadcrumbs. All right, let's make these breadcrumbs. It's very simple. All we're going to do is we're going to take the bread and we're going to cut off the crusts like this and just roughly cut them into cubes like that. No big deal. It doesn't have to be perfect at all because these are going to go into a food processor. I'm going to do that with the rest of the bread and we'll be right back. Oh, by the way, I just want to show you something. You don't have to do one piece at a time, obviously. If you really want to get going with this program, you do everything at once, just like this. All right, being careful, of course, not to try not to squash the bread too badly, and then you just trim off the edges and do like I said before. Just cut them into pieces like this. That's actually best done individually like that because you will squash down the bread if you don't do it individually. So it doesn't take that long to do it. All right, that's all. Be back in a minute. All right, I've taken care of the bread. It's now going to go into the bowl of a food processor. I'm sure everybody has a food processor. If you don't, you can just use regular breadcrumbs. You can buy them from the store and do what I'm going to do here in 1 second. And that is very simply to just add in some grated Pecorino Romano. What does this do? This adds flavor. It also adds salt because I don't want to add salt. Now, a lot of times you'll see breadcrumbs for this particular recipe adding pepper. And you know what I feel about pepper. If pepper goes into hot oil, then what's going to happen? The pepper is going to burn and it's going to become a little bit bitter, and we don't want that at all. So a little bit of cheese, which will not only give it the salt that it needs, but a cheesy flavor to it, as well as browning up very, very nicely too, and being a part of that crust. It'll be delicious. So I'll come back when we do that. All right, so I have the box grater here, and I know it's really not worth it for you guys to watch this because I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I like to grate the cheese on the fine side of the grater. Okay, and not create larger pieces, because we want these to disappear into the breadcrumbs and be a part of the breadcrumbs, amalgamate themselves into the breadcrumbs, as it were. So there you go. I'll be back. All right, so we have some pecorino. We put the pecorino inside with the rest of the bread, and we're going to process that in just a minute. Let me get this so you can actually see what's going on here. I'll just take this knife and we'll put that in there like this. All right, that's it. Let's go to the machine and we'll process this. All right, we have our top on top of the bowl, or bowl on top of the machine, and we'll turn it on and we will process these until they're very fine. All right, so here we go. This is absolutely perfect, okay? You don't want to process for too long, about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that. You don't want the blades to make the breadcrumbs mixture very, very hot. So that's it. Now we are going to put our canola oil on the fire and then go about breading our asparagus. So far, we haven't even seen asparagus, have we? As far as the preparation is concerned. But there's a reason for that. Is because we're going to put our oil on first and ensure that it slowly comes up to temperature. That way, we'll be ready to fry when the asparagus is breaded. So we're not going to bread and then wait for the oil to come up to temperature. Now, in a regular restaurant, you're going to have a fryer that's continually all day long at temperature, and so that's not an issue. But in the home, it is an issue. So there we go. Put a little bit of heat underneath there, and we're going to turn it down to about, I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 10, about a 3, and slowly let it heat up so that when we're ready, if the oil is not at temperature, it's just going to take a couple of, maybe a minute or two to get it there. So now let's go and deal with the asparagus. All right, now let's turn our attention to the asparagus. So asparagus, of course, is going to be very, very tough in this area. But doing something like this, where you just break it off, is not exactly the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to basically go anywhere you want that doesn't look as woody. So let's just cut them right here. So this is an elegant size. And what we'll do is basically make everything even, just like this, and then cut down. All right? It doesn't really matter in this case if everything is perfectly even, by virtue of the fact that this is not exactly going to go into a fine dining room. This is something that you're going to make to have as an appetizer, or even on the side, all right? Because it's fried. Now, if this was a Michelin-starred restaurant and we wanted to do this, then we would have to peel everything. But by virtue of the fact that it's going to go into the deep fryer, it's going to cook everything just fine. Let me show you one other thing with regard to asparagus. I have another couple of spears right here, all right? We don't want these to be too thick, and we don't want them to be too thin. This is kind of a, if I were to just break it here, it breaks just as easily over here as it does over here. And so that's the reason why we're going to choose the size and then cut it. If it gets to be too woody, look, here, anywhere I bend it, it's going to break. So that's not the way to find out where you should cut the asparagus. Look, would you say that that's acceptable, or would you think that maybe that's more acceptable? So that part of it really makes no sense at all. What does make sense is that if they are longer and it is kind of woody on the ends, or dry, if you look, see, that's not dry at all. But if we were to look here, can see, well, even then, these are pretty fresh, right? So it's still wet. But if this was a little bit dry, we would cut up to where, and then peel just the edge here, and that would make it palatable. But these are going to go into deep fryer, and they're going to cook all the way through. And so we don't want stuff that's too thin, and we don't want them to be too thick either, because if they're too thin, they're going to just disintegrate, and if they're too thick, well, then the outside will brown prior to the inside of the asparagus being cooked. So there's a happy medium there. All right, let's go wash these, and then I'm going to set up the breading system, and then we're going to bread everything. I don't think that I need to show you all of that stuff. It's flour, it's egg. I take a couple of eggs and beat them up, and then put our breadcrumbs, just like you saw, in a separate pan. All right, we'll be back. All right, my Italian food fanatics, here we are. I have washed the asparagus, and what we want is the asparagus to be somewhat damp. We don't want them to be wet, but we want them to be damp so that the flour adheres to the spears. That rhymes. I didn't even know it. So that the flour adheres to the spears. Anyway, so they're going to go into the flour, and then into the egg wash, and then into our breadcrumbs. So there we go. That's one. I'm not going to take you through the whole process with all of them. We're just going to do one here, and then like to cover them up like that, pat them down, and that beautifully coats the asparagus. Look how nicely that coats it. When that goes into the oil, it's going to fry up beautifully. And so we put them aside into a tray. I'll do the rest of them, and we'll come back and go to the stove. All right, here we are. This is our pot. It's been on the fire, and I'm going to take the temperature here. It looks like it's 375, 380, about 383, 384, something like that, 385. And that's okay, because when we put these asparagus in the oil, the temperature will come down. So let's just do one here. That's one. Let's do a 2 or 3. Let's see where they go. We want to kind of keep them apart. If they get together, they're going to stick together. Asparagus that get together stick together. We don't want that. We want to divide and conquer. So you'll see they will slowly begin to brown. They're actually browning a little bit faster than I wanted them to, but that's okay. That's not a problem at all. The carryover cooking will also help us, and it helps to keep the asparagus a little bit crunchy as well. So it's all good all the way around the block. I'll let them cook just a little bit more. And I've also prepared a pan here off to the side, if you can see, with some paper towel in there. And that ensures that when we put these out of the oil, when we take them out of the oil, that they drain properly. Look at that. Look how beautiful that is. I'm going to let it go for a couple more seconds. Keep them submerged so they evenly brown. And those bubbles that are coming out, that's good. That means that the water vapor is coming out of the asparagus, and the asparagus are not soaking up the oil. All right? So I think we're at the point where these asparagus are pretty much beautifully brown like that. On the video, they probably look darker than they do in real life for me here. So here we go. We put those aside. Now I only did 3 here. Of course, the next batch, we're going to do a few more than that, because I do want this water temperature, or this oil temperature, pardon me, to go down. You have to be very careful here, okay? You don't want to burn yourself. The oil that comes up from that can can very easily burn your hands, as I am I've been a victim many times. And I'll be a victim again, I'm sure, many more times. So that's essentially it. We're going to continue to cook these, and I will come back when they're all done. All right, I wanted to show you something. The second batch that I just put in, believe it or not, is taking a little bit longer to cook. That's because, as I mentioned, the oil temperature did drop, and so consequently I've had to turn up the fire a little bit to compensate for it. But you can see, well, you're not here, but I can tell you that it's probably taking double the amount of time for these to brown up than it did for the original 3 that I put in, because that oil was way too hot. We need about 350 degrees. But it's okay to bring it up to 370, something like that, because it will drop. 20 degrees is not that much. All right? So now these are going to be, the carryover cooking is going to cook the rest of those, the original 3. But now look how beautiful these have turned out. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. So we're at the right temperature now. It may take the same thing for you when you're doing this at home as I am, because we're not in a commercial kitchen with a very powerful deep fryer. This is stuff that you have to kind of do on your own, and it makes it somewhat more challenging than it would be in a commercial kitchen or commercial setting. All right? So these are the vagaries of trying to replicate some of these recipes at home that are very easy for people in regular food service to accomplish because of the lack of proper equipment. All right, but don't let that stop you. All right, I'll be back when these are done. A couple of other things. You notice that the oil that I put in the pot was only about 1/3 up the side of the pot. That's done on purpose, because if the oil is too high in the pot, if it's, say, for example, at half of, if it comes up halfway, sometimes when you deep fry stuff, you'll get this boiling over. Now, in a commercial kitchen, again, the fryers are, there's a level for the oil, and even if they do come up in bubbles and things like that, it's equipped to deal with it. Whereas in a home kitchen, you are not equipped to deal with it. It's also not uncommon for the oil, as it's used, believe it or not, makes the food taste better. So the original brand new oil is really not that flavorful. And of course, as time goes on, depending on how long, typically about 2 weeks, at the end of 2 to 3 weeks, that oil also begins to lose its flavor and effectiveness. So, believe it or not, there's something to be said about oil that is not brand new and not too old, kind of in the middle. It imparts a better flavor. And companies like McDonald's have spent millions of dollars trying to figure out how they can introduce that flavor into the oil when it's brand new. So if they change the oil out so as not to let it go too long, they're going to know exactly, on every 5th day or what have you. I have no idea what they do at McDonald's, but every 5th day we change the oil, that there's no change in flavor when they do put in brand new oil. So there's something to be said about that. As this asparagus cooks and as the oil gets more and more of these flavors in there, the subsequent asparagus that are cooked become better tasting, believe it or not, than the first batch. So just thought that you might find that a little bit interesting, and I'll come back again. Hopefully, if I don't think of anything else, I will come back when I'm done. All right, I have another thing, of course, it's Murphy's Law. You notice that I put these in with my hands, and I don't use the tongs. And the reason for that is that you see, if I use the tongs and I squeeze too much, that will destroy the breading that I have on the asparagus. So we don't want to do that. We want to put them in by hand. However, between you and me, if you're not used to doing this, I would suggest that you do use the tongs in lieu of worrying about the asparagus, because it's safer that way. All right? And I'm not joking about that. To just throw them in like that is a little bit dangerous. If you're going to do anything like that, do me a favor and put them away from your hands, and that way you are less susceptible to getting burned, just like this. All right, just lay them away from you. All right, this is the last of the batch. I actually have more to do, but for you and I, we're just going to keep it here. And I'll be back when these are done and we can taste them. We're actually going to do a couple of other things to them too after this, but we'll be back. All right, here they are. Perfectly done. These are a little bit less done as far as done at brownness than these are, but you can see and you can choose how much more done or less done that you want to do them yourself. Now let's plate them up and let us taste them. We're going to add some lemon juice and also some shaved Parmigiano Reggiano, and I'll do that right now. We'll see you at the tasting table. Hello, my Italian food fanatics. Well, it's go time. It's time to taste this stuff and see if it's any good. I don't know. I actually do know, but the suspense is killing you, I'm sure. I'm going to eat this with a fork and knife. I don't know if you can hear the crunch, but it's still crunchy. That pecorino, that adds a lot to the flavor of the breadcrumbs, and of course the asparagus is young and fresh. Oh, and then you add in that lemon zest and the Parmigiano Reggiano. And then, of course, the mixture, believe it or not, of the pecorino and the saltiness of it. And I add a little bit of Maldon salt afterwards. And the lemon juice and the crunchiness and the sweetness of the asparagus. My goodness. You have to try this. Now, I tried it using panko breadcrumbs. It's not so good. You got to use just regular El Cheapo white bread. Cut the crusts off like I showed you. Wow, this is really good. Anyway, the asparagus is perfectly cooked. The outside's crunchy, the inside's not too mushy or anything like that. The lemon adds a beautiful counterbalance to the base notes of the asparagus and the sweetness. And there's a little bit, obviously there's tartness because of the lemon. And then of course the cheese. I mean, it just works perfectly. So don't waste any more time. Please go to the store, get yourself some asparagus, get a cheap loaf of white bread, a couple of eggs. You have flour around the house, and make this for yourself. A little bit of canola oil. All right, I use canola oil. I'm not going to waste olive oil and deep fry stuff in it. It's not like it's fish or something like that. This is a vegetable, although I do treat everything with respect and consideration. Canola oil is not going to add any flavors to this because we have already too much going on. So go to the store, get yourself some fresh asparagus, not too thin, not too thick, about medium size. Cut them like I showed you. Fry them up. It's great as an appetizer because you want to serve this as close to the time that it comes out of the oil as possible. You don't want to let it wait around for any length of time, unless you're using another chemical that I'm not going to get into right now to make everything crispy. I don't think you need it. It's more for commercial uses. I may do something on it in the future. But anyway, regardless, this is a great thing. Shave some Parmesan on there. You can use a microplane grater. You can use whatever. You don't have to do like what I did and make shavings of it. You can make it fine and coat everything. But boy, is it going to be good. So go out and get some. Please, before we go, like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, click the bell, and then when it says all, hit all so you get all of my, you'll know when all of my things come on there. So it's not just selective or what YouTube chooses to do, and share. And If you feel like it, leave me a comment down below. That helps too. Look, we're all in this together. I hope that I'm making stuff that you are going to try or just enjoy watching me make. Regardless, like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment, share with your friends, and I'll see you very, very soon. Thank you.